This is serious, and we cannot take chances. It is life-threatening.
This is a dangerous storm.
There's no gas, there's no food, there's no ice, there's nothing.
Follow the news, follow the Weather Channel. I'm going to be very aggressive at getting the state ready. You need to be very aggressive at getting your family ready.
So think about it. When you've got a population the size of Florida and every nook and cranny is filled with people who have either decided to live here or have been down here vacationing, it's hard to move all that around because you got to move over areas where it's going to be bad. And listen, when you even evacuate inland here, whether it's Orlando, Lake City, up the I-75 corridor, make sure you're in a very protected structure because we're talking about 100-mile-an-hour winds almost to the Georgia line. Almost to the Georgia line. If not, they probably will be. All right, let's talk about what we know so far. First of all, Miami-Dade evacuation orders include about 650,000 residents, which is just huge here. That makes it the largest attempted evacuation in Miami-Dade County history. All right. Fort Lauderdale International will cease operation today at 7:45 p.m. So if you've got a flight or you're thinking, well, I'll just get out tomorrow morning, it's not going to happen out of Fort Lauderdale. OK, it's not going to happen. 4,000 commercial airline flights in Irma's path have been canceled already. So check your flight if you're going anywhere near Florida. And Atlanta, by the way, huge airport. You're going to be impacted as well as this thing comes north. Think about what a tropical or a severe thunderstorm warning includes. Winds at 58 miles per hour or gusts to 58. OK, we could see that in Atlanta. So Atlanta, this is your storm too. Please don't forget that. Florida's governor has ordered all public schools and colleges and universities to close. This is what we were talking about this morning, Friday through Monday. And Steph, again, I cannot reiterate enough the fact that I really think, you know, a couple of days ago, Governor Rick Scott has set the tone. He's been firm. He's pretty much made some pretty severe decisions on how to close this state down. Yes. Obviously taking it very serious. And if you get leadership at the top, setting the tone, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And I think that's happening here in the state of Florida.
Jim, I think it is unprecedented, and correct me if I'm wrong, to shut down all public schools, all universities in an entire state. Has that ever happened before? Not in my memory that I can think of.
No, me either. Me either. We'll get areas certainly where that'll get shut down, but when you're talking about an entire state, that's a whole different story. And Steph, that's a testament to what we're talking about here. 100-plus-mile-an-hour winds all the way up to the Georgia line, potentially. Yeah, sure, the Western Panhandle may not see those, but I certainly think up the I-75, up the I-95 corridors, the Florida Turnpike has a very good shot of seeing those kind of destructive winds. And it's going to be stronger in South Florida.
Shoot, Jim, with this Euro. Yeah, that's true. I'm saying shoot with this Euro, keep shifting west, Jim. We'll see about that. So we'll talk more about that shift and why we're seeing that shift and all the models, and we can discuss the nitty-gritty meteorological details for you and how there's an upper level low and how that will affect the whole system. But let's go to Kennedy Space Center here because they are boarding up. They are battening down the hatches. Everybody is here in Florida. There's no one that can escape this. And usually a lot of times we think of hurricanes being coastal things. I mean, the eye wall of this thing could go right up the center. With that said, around Lake Okeechobee, there are evacuations. We're talking places like Pahokee and also Clewiston, Belglade, all those cities right around Lake Okeechobee. They're concerned about the water spilling over the top. Let's talk about where Irma is right now. And of course, we had a 5 a.m. advisory. We're going to get an 8 a.m. intermediate advisory and then a big update at 11 a.m. this morning. But here's the very latest. It is a Category 4. But don't let your guard down. First of all, even if this comes in as a Category 3, which, by the way, we're not anticipating, that is significant. Right now, our winds are at 155. A Category 5 is 157-mile-an-hour winds. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, nothing has changed with this. And it could fluctuate as we head over time. Waves are going to be an issue. Once the light comes up, I'm going to show you how expansive the beach is. I was talking to a guy on the plane yesterday on the way down here, and he said it's such a shame because they've just done so much restoration, you know, in beachfront communities and the beaches, and they're going to get annihilated here. The waves are just going to erode away and eat away at the beaches, and unfortunately, all the homes that are right along the beaches here. So surge 5 to 10 feet here in Florida. This is not like a Katrina scenario where you're going to get a 30-foot surge in Florida, and that has to do with the slope. It's called bathymetry. One of the reasons it has to do with the slope coming off of the east coast of Florida. If you ever go to the beach here, it drops off very fast, opposed to like the Panhandle of Florida, where you can, you know, walk out for quite a while. So a lot of that is a little bit different here, but we're going to have surge nonetheless. Wind is going to be, I think, the biggest factor with this. We do, of course, have hurricane warnings in the Bahamas. Tropical storm force winds extending out 175 miles from the center. Hurricane force winds extending out 70 miles from the center. So if this goes right up the state, that's it. Either side, we are just getting whacked from it. And the eye wall has just been, so tightly wound and so tightly packed. And you're going to see fluctuations in that. So don't let it fool you as we head over time. Jim, and I think that's, something, if someone might look at the satellite and be like, oh, the eye wall is kind of falling apart. No. This thing's going over very warm water, and there's really nothing to stop it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? Guys, put that satellite picture back up for a second. You did see a little bit of what looked like a weakening in that secondary eye wall, but look at how those purples are coming back on that. If we can show that. You see how that's coming back there? Steph, I don't know if you have a monitor, but you see that? That just scares the heck out of me.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
and
be
that's
honest
what
with
I'm
you.
saying.
I'm not convinced.
Jim, a lot of people...
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it goes through these eye wall replacement cycles. A lot of people hear that, Jim, and might not know exactly even what that means. So I think that we need to explain what that is when we're saying that, and I'll give you the mic to do that.
Yeah, so guys, what we're talking about and what Stephanie's talking about here is there's so much dynamic energy going on in that inner eye wall that with all that rising air motion, at times there's going to be some sinking air motion. And we know that the most mature hurricanes replace their eyes with a newer eye. Sometimes it's a wider eye. It'll go out several miles and then contract again. So I think the weakening that you're seeing and why we're in a Cat 4 is because of the ERC, the eye wall replacement cycle, which means it could intensify again, because we know, Steph, if you look at the bigger picture, right, the outflow is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Oh, this is perfect. Great job, H. John's weather. This is what you're seeing. There's the eye replacement site. You see the red and the yellow on the outer rim, and then it starts tight. Here comes the new eye wall, wide, and then it starts tightening up again. So it's a pulsing of that eye. It does not mean the hurricane is weakening. As a matter of fact, I would argue it is still very, very healthy, and it could even strengthen back up to a Cat 5 before it makes its way into Florida. Go ahead, Steph.
Sometimes the wind field expands when you have that eye wall replacement. Now, yesterday, the hurricane force winds out only 50 miles. Today, out 70 miles. So that's something to consider, and I know you're going to focus on the details now of Florida.
Yeah, so guys, the fact that Stephanie's talking about 140-mile wide hurricane wind field is huge. That means no coast escapes this. No coast escapes this. Will you take the east side in Tampa? Probably not, from what we see right now. But you know what? You're going to have a heck of a hit. Naples, Fort Myers. I'm not convinced this thing's not going to continue to jog to the west a little bit. I mean, think about it. We're playing with 50 to 70 miles here still. The turn, unfortunately, happens right over the Keys. And where that turn happens and the angle of approach makes all the difference in the world, and who takes the worst part of that eye wall, okay? So, guys, looking at pictures again on the south side there, the British Virgin Islands, think about what's happened here in the last 3 days. We have seen major destruction in Barbuda, in the northeastern Leeward Islands, in parts of the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. And I can't even imagine what has happened in the Turks and Caicos, given the storm surge forecast that we had, all right? So if you look at the maps here, this is why I'm worried about Florida. Steph's talking about the ERC, the eye wall replacement cycles. Yes, they may bring the winds down. Don't let your guard down. Look at that warm water it has to go over. And there's not going to be any shear until at least Sunday with this. So if anything, as the shear approaches, it helps to evacuate the storm further. Now, I caution you as you look at this model. Do not say, well, Cantori, what are you talking about west coast of Florida? This is one model. This is one solution. And the fact that the European solution has performed the best, and it is much farther west than you see here, means that that center could be farther west than what this model shows. But this is also a viable solution, because this is much like what we see with the GFS. Now that right there, the solution that you're looking at on Sunday morning, is an absolute disaster, certainly for Miami, for Fort Lauderdale, up through the West Palm beaches. All right, a little less impactful on the Keys, but that is, again, guys, that is just that solution. That is just that solution. Imagine that solution 70 miles to the west. What does that mean to the southern Keys? What does that mean to Naples and Fort Myers? That's a whole different animal, right? And then, of course, this thing comes right up the coast. And if we start at 150, and we move it up, it is going to weaken, but you're still talking about the potential to get 100-mile-an-hour winds all the way to the Georgia-Florida line. All right, I want to bring in Jen Carfagna. Now, Jen, one thing that does do for Charleston and even parts of North Carolina is if we can weaken this by the time it gets to Georgia with a landfall and staying on land, we may take the winds down where you are, but the surge is still going to be a huge issue in Charleston.
And Jim, the surge is going to be an issue even before the rain starts, and the winds pick up here as well, because as you know, we're going to have that general onshore, that wind pushing the water onshore in advance of Irma moving up in this direction. So on Sunday here in Charleston and down into Savannah, even before we get any of the rain and the tropical storm force conditions from Irma, we will start to see a surge component and a water issue here along the coastal areas. By Monday, we could be talking, record tide levels here in Charleston. There's going to be coastal routes to the barrier islands here and in Georgia that will be impassable because of the water rise that is expected because of this. I want to talk about this track, and Jim and Steph have alluded to this as well, and just about the size of Irma and how when you look at the track, a lot of South Carolina is not necessarily in the cone, but there will be impacts and they will be outside of the cone, and so you will feel the winds, even inland. And a lot of folks who in South Carolina are choosing to evacuate, and there's not a mandatory evacuation yet, but I know in Columbia, South Carolina, already 97% of the hotels are filled. So people are choosing to get out. Know that there will still be a strong wind component there as well. To time that out for you, we're looking at the winds starting to pick up through the day on Sunday. The brunt of the weather here in South Carolina and South Georgia will be felt on Monday. Another concern, along with the fact that depending on the track, we could have fierce winds or we could have strong winds. Either way, they will be impactful. The surge will be a component at the coast, but we also will have an isolated tornado threat as well, and that comes on Monday as we watch some of those outer bands start to work on up into the area. Timing it out for you when we talk about the water and we talk about the coastal areas, and you see how the coastline kind of bends, right? So that sort of just collects in the water, which is another reason why there is this concern for surge on the Georgia coast and on the South Carolina coast as well. Now, Governor Nathan Deal has expanded the state of emergency in Georgia, now adding another 24 counties, so 30 counties under that state of emergency, and officials are urging preparedness.
The governor's evacuation order coincides with what we were planning